There's nothing new about recognising that humans have the capacity to significantly affect the world for better or worse. You think about why the changes are happening. If you go back to the fundamentals of the natural food chain, what plants require to grow is carbon dioxide and water and warmth. And we're changing all of the above. The competition between different plant species is being altered by changing growing conditions. So the balance of natural systems of plants is changing, which is changing the diet for herbivores, which in turn is changing the balance of herbivores in the system, which is changing the diet of carnivores. 20 years ago, there was still some doubt in the scientific community about whether there was an observable human agency. I think there's no longer any serious doubt in the scientific community. As a function of climate change, the average annual rainfall in southwest Western Australia has dropped by about 20%. But because it's hotter and drier when it rains, the runoff into Perth's water supply system now is on average 1/3 of the figure before 1975. So a 20% drop in rainfall has resulted in a 70% reduction in available water, seeing significant costs of climate change. And I get incandescent with fury when I hear politicians say we can't afford to respond, because we're already paying a significant price, whether it's in reduced agricultural production or increased cost of water supply or increased cost of extreme events. And again, the insurance industry have known this for 20 years. There were reinsurance companies at Greenhouse 87 saying we know climate change is happening because we can see it in the red ink on our profit and loss statements for property insurance. Imagine for a moment that for reasons best known to ourselves, we in Australia wanted to accelerate global warming. Just suspend your disbelief for a moment and assume that we had a dotty government that for reasons best known to itself wanted to accelerate global warming. How could we go about that? Well, since energy use is roughly proportional to population, and if there's more people, we use more energy, a starting point of a strategy would be to encourage an increasing population. And if it wasn't increasing fast enough through natural causes and a uniquely high level of immigration, perhaps we could have financial incentives of a few $1,000s to people who have children, and maybe we could encourage it with facile slogans like one for the husband, one for the wife, one for Peter Costello, that sort of thing. If you wanted to compound the effect of an increasing population, you could have increasing per capita energy use, and you could encourage this by running down public transport, encouraging people to drive one to a large car. Maybe you could have a tax concession for four-wheel drive vehicles to encourage people to drive large urban assault vehicles to cope with the difficult terrain of suburban streets. And perhaps at the state level you could even subsidise motor spirit to ensure that people didn't see any negative price signals that might discourage them from using the car. At the national level you could subsidise fossil fuels in other ways, like subsidising road freight or subsidising coal-fired aluminium smelting to encourage people to put more carbon dioxide into the air. What else could you do? Well, I suppose at the local level you could put money into building more roads and bridges and tunnels to encourage people to drive by car. You could have no vehicle fleet efficiency standards or no national standards for efficiency of vehicles at the individual level. You could have poor efficiency standards compared with the rest of the world. And perhaps if you wanted to make sure that we punched above our weight, we could export coal and gas to the rest of the world to encourage them to burn fossil fuels that we can't burn ourselves. If a visitor from another galaxy happened upon our civilization, they would conclude that despite the fact that there was an impressive volume of reports about climate change, we still aren't serious about mitigating the process. The spectre has been raised that any sort of serious response would cause economic damage, bring the coal industry to its knees and cause small children to starve in the street. Just in case you believe that sort of nonsense, and I notice that the Murdoch press is still running the line that it would be irresponsible to commit to a target of 60% reduction when who knows what damage that might do to the economy. Well, just two pieces of evidence. I mean, the facts have never got in the way of a good editorial, I suppose, but just two pieces of evidence. The Business Leaders Round Table, made up of such greeny outfits as Westpac and BP and Origin Energy and Insurance Australia Group and Swiss Re, commissioned modelling by Allens Consulting to compare the business as usual approach in which emissions increased by 85%, with an aggressive reduction strategy in which they're reduced by 60% by 2050. And they concluded that the level of economic activity which we now expect on the 1st of January 2050 would be deferred until about the middle of April 2050 if we pursued an aggressive reduction strategy. In other words, there is no significant economic damage from an aggressive reduction strategy. I think the crucial point is that as citizens we should be reminding politicians that we expect a concerted response, that we expect better public transport, we expect improved urban design so that we don't need as much transport, and we expect cleaner electricity. In case you're not sure that nuclear energy is a dangerous diversion, I draw your attention to the latest issue of Social Alternatives, the Nuclear Debate Revisited, or indeed my quarterly essay, which will be released in 9 days' time, which says in mind-numbing detail that if nuclear power is the answer, it must have been a very silly question. There's a range of reports going back to one published by the Department of Resources and Energy in Canberra in 1992 that show that we could get 30% of our electricity from renewables for no significant extra cost. We could get 100% of our electricity from renewables for an extra cost that would be tolerable, particularly if it was combined with credible efficiency measures which would dramatically reduce the amount of electricity we need to provide the same services we now enjoy. None of the power supply that we will have in 2050 has been built yet, because the average life of power stations is between 30 and 40 years. So it's nonsense to say we can't influence what the supply system will look like in 2050. Indeed, what the supply system looks like in 2050 will be completely determined by the political actions that are taken in the lifetime of most of us. And I believe we have a responsibility to all future generations to be doing what we can in our lifetime. Now that we know it's a serious problem, now that we know it's possible to solve the problem, to be doing what we can as individuals, as members of community groups, but most importantly as citizens who elect governments and expect them to respond to our will, to ensure that we respond in a timely and concerted way. Thank you very much.